Today I will be dealing with ascending and descending tracts in the spinal cord. In the functions of the spinal cord, we have these sensory functions, motor functions, the reflexes, and the autonomic nervous system. I have covered the checked portions, that the reflexes of the spinal cord and the autonomic nervous system. Today I briefly go with the sensory functions and motor functions. The sensory functions of the spinal cord include all of these. One, they transmit signals from the body, that is soma, to the brain. That means from the periphery to the brain, the various parts of the brain. Then they transmit signals to the neighboring areas, the segmental, suprasegmental or infrasegmental. That means intersegmental relays. As a part of the sensory signal, they sort the various signals coming in the different areas. That is the gray matter of the spinal cord. So the lamina 1 to lamina 10, they are all sorted. Then there is some percentage of processing occurring, the sensory processing occurring in the spinal cord. So that means the processing such as inhibition of the impulses going upwards to the brain, or facilitation of the impulses. That means the focusing of the impulses by through the lateral inhibition and even facilitation. Then convergence of the impulses. The good example is the visceral sensation and the somatic sensation, how they converge each other, and then they will reach to the brain areas. And the lateral inhibition. So these are this thing. Gating is done by the inputs coming to the various nuclei or the centers in the spinal cord. They try to inhibit. Especially this becomes an important aspect in terms of modulating pain. What is called a gate control theory. Now, just looking at what are the various areas the outputs from the spinal cord reach. I have already mentioned the various areas here, the suprasegmental or infrasegmental. So that means one or two segments up, one or two segments up, down through the Clark's column or some of these spinal columns, they will be reaching. That is intersegmental. Then there are some bundles, they are reaching from spinocervical. They reach up to the cervical level. Then the outputs from the spinal cord, whatever the fibers coming from the soma or the body, they will reach medulla with crossing, without crossing. Some of them would reach to the medulla and then cross, and some of them would cross in the segmental level in the spinal cord and then reach the medulla. So that means there would be medullary connection. And some of them, they end in the medulla. That I will tell. So that means medulla is one of the target area. Then a reticular system. The reticular system comprises of a network of neurons within the brainstem, that is the medulla pons midbrain, that forms the brainstem. Within the brainstem, there is a network of neurons, and this network of neurons receive inputs from the ascending and descending fibers going through that particular segment. That is the reticular system. So that means anything going to the thalamus or above would give a collateral to the reticular system. That is one. That means reticular system is a complex network. Then the spinal cord directly talks to cerebellum. because cerebellar inputs are modulated by the spinocerebellar tracts. And the spinal cord also talks to the midbrain or the upper pontine area, the tectum, that is a superior colliculus, and above the, what is called a collicular area or a tectum. And this tectum is the place where you will get the inputs from the visual side, that means from the occipital cortex. Then there would be inputs from the sound system, that is the auditory system. Auditory system or occipital, that is the visual system, and this tectum also receives inputs from the basal ganglia and from the pontine area, this especially the cerebellum, that is a pontopeduncular nucleus. So that the colliculus receives all these things that would give you the orientation for the action. Then the outputs reach to the thalamus. So that means I have I have stipulated the 6 areas, one within the segments, to the medulla, to the reticular system, to the cerebellum, to the colliculus or tectum, to the thalamus. In that way, the all of these fibers ascend up in 3 different columns. As these columns make this green, blue, and red. These are the white matter of the spinal cord. Now, what is shown in the white is the gray matter of the spinal cord. Now, all these fibers they ascend up in these colored areas, and these will reach the brain. Now, or they will the fibers would come down. That this is a white matter. So this is this red segment is known as the posterior column. This is a posterior column, also known as a posterior funiculus. So now this is the lateral column or lateral funiculus. You can just see that lateral funiculus. Blue one is the lateral funiculus, the lateral column. So now this one is the green one is the anterior or ventral funiculus. So that means there are 3 columns by which these ascending or descending fibers, that is the white matter, they are coming through in the spinal cord. The remaining part is the gray matter. This gray matter is divided into 10 areas, and these 10 areas are laminates or the nuclei or the nucleus of the spinal cord. Now, coming back here, I will just briefly tell about the ascending tracts, because in my talk, what I have made, I have made the segments which reach to the intersegments, especially these areas. We have the just before the substantia gelatinosa, the cap. So these areas communicate with the other segments of the spinal cord. Okay, so that is one. That means that forms that forms one of these things, and these red areas here, they constitute spinospinal fibers, the spinospinal tracts. That means what I was talking about, above and below are going up here in these marginal areas. These marginal areas. Now, here on the posterior column, this is a posterior column, the red one here, the posterior column, we have the fibers which carry the neosensations. The neosensation is fine touch, the vibration, the tactile localization, tactile discrimination, and the stereognosis. And all these aspects, all fine things, these are carried by these fibers. The interior one, the gracilis fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. The fasciculus gracilis takes the information from the lower limbs below the thoracic level, and this is upper thoracic to cervical, that is the neck region. Cuneatus is the neck region. These are the fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. And look here, these are the fibers which have not crossed, which have not gone. That means from the same side is going to the medulla, and in the medulla they cross and ascend as the medial lemniscal bundle. So that means in the spinal cord, the posterior column carries the neosensation, which is not crossed. Now we have here in the lateral funiculus or lateral column, we have two important ascending tracts. One, this is the dorsal spinocerebellar tract, and this is the ventral spinocerebellar tract. This lateral spinothalamic tract is not from the same side. So that means the pain information, thermal information relays in the lamina 2 and 4. Then from there, it will cross, the relay takes place. There is another projecting neuron, this cross, and after crossing, these fibers ascend up. This is a lateral spinothalamic tract. So these are crossed fibers. The spinotectal and the spino-olivary fibers. So again, they are ascending up. This is going to the tectum, because what is happening, these spinotectal and the spino-olivary fibers are the fibers which they try to help the olivary nucleus to control the cerebellar activity. So the information, whatever is coming here, so we get the information from the reticulospinal tract or vestibulospinal tract. That information, whether the action has been taken or not, that would be reaching to the spinotectal and the spino-olivary path. They will ascend up. Then we have anterior spinothalamic tract. Again, this is the lateral spinothalamic tract. This is the anterior spinothalamic tract. The lateral spinothalamic tract carries the pain and thermal sensation, and here this is a crude touch and pressure. They are carried by the anterior spinothalamic tract. That's about the ascending tracts. Briefly, the posterior column carries the fine touch, vibration, tactile localization, tactile discrimination through these fasciculus or a bundle of gracilis from the lower limb, the bundle of cuneatus from the upper limb and the neck. They are uncrossed. Then we have some of the fibers, they will go to these are proprioceptive fibers. They will ascend as the dorsal spinocerebellar tract and the ventral spinocerebellar tract. These ventral spinocerebellar tract receive inputs from the motor neurons here for the action taken. So then we have the lateral spinothalamic tract and the ventral spinal thalamic tract, that is anterior spinothalamic tract. So that would be from the opposite side. So now the spinotectal and the spino-olivary, they will ascend up going to the tectum and the olivary nucleus. These marginal things are for the intersegmental spinospinal pathway. The Leisser's tract is here, and this Leisser's tract is also ascends up and down to the intersegments. Here, the same thing. Look at this fasciculus gracilis, fasciculus cuneatus. This is taken from Guyton. Then dorsal spinocerebellar tract, the ventral spinocerebellar tract. This is a spinotectal, the lateral spinothalamic, and the ventral spinothalamic. I think you should be able to make the diagram and put it. So now move on to the supply to the motor neurons and their linking and operating for the segmental and suprasegmental level. That is one motor. That means going to the muscles. And to the muscles, we have the intrafusal fiber and extrafusal fiber. The alpha motor neurons supply the extrafusal fibers that result in the muscle contraction. The gamma motor neurons supply the intrafusal fibers that would be producing the contraction and responsible for the muscle tone. That is a partial state of contraction. So now these two are linked, the alpha and motor neurons. These two are linked through the intrafusal fibers and 1A afferents in via a monosynaptic or disynaptic pathway in the spinal cord. Then we have the reflexes. I have mentioned about these reflexes, the stretch reflex, monosynaptic, withdrawal reflexes, the universal stretch reflex, crossed extensor reflex. I will not go into the details of these things. I have dealt with them in my earlier lectures. The postural reflexes, the positive supporting reaction, negative supporting reaction, the grasp response or reflex, these are all the posture related. So making it a rigid structure or making it loose, giving away or holding on to the objects. And then we have a basic pattern generator located in the spinal cord, wherein the movement of locomotion, the flexion and extension, that the agonist and antagonist group of muscles are interacting together so that we can have a walking or a gait. So these are the reflexes. Now coming back here, considering all that, so what are the areas from which the inputs reach the spinal cord? One of the areas is the spinal cord itself. That means it communicates or it interacts with itself. The area is the reticular system. Reticular system is divided into two aspects. One, the one which comes from the medulla, and one which comes from the ponto or mesenchymal, from midbrain and pontine area. Midbrain pontine area and pontine medullary reticular system. So that is that means they are coming from the medulla, from the pons. We have the olivary nucleus, olivospinal pathway. Olivospinal, from the olivary nucleus. Olivary nucleus receives inputs from the cerebellum and to the from the some part of the cerebellar inputs, that mainly the system. So these vestibular system, that means semicircular canals, and we have the colliculus, that is tectum. I was telling tectum is the junction of the somatic sensory modality, visual sensory modality, auditory sensory modality, and all these three things, or even more, all other things, even the basal ganglia are inputs, the cerebellar inputs, all these things are joined here in the colliculus, that is the greater junctional point. So then we have a rubrospinal, that means from the red nucleus, they will descend up. Then we have the corticospinal, that means from the motor cortex, they descend down. So, but the motor cortex of the opposite side. These are of the opposite side. So they will cross in the medulla. They will cross in the medulla. So that means the most of them are, especially the pontine reticular system, may be from the same side, but the vestibular system same side. The olivary is from the same side. These things are from the opposite side. Now look here, these are the descending tracts. The first is what I was talking about, a Leisser's tract. A Leisser's tract is this, that is up and down movement of the spinal cord. Again, we have a lateral corticospinal tract. This part, lateral corticospinal tract. This is the corticospinal tract of the brain. But here, if it is coming, if it is on the left side, say for example, if this is coming from here, it is the opposite side. So this one is from this opposite side. That means these are crossed fibers. This is a lateral corticospinal tract. When we say lateral corticospinal tract, we have a ventral corticospinal tract. So the ventral corticospinal, you can see that this part. So they are coming from the same to the spinal cord, whereas these are the crossed fibers. Crossed fibers. Then we have from the red nucleus, the opposite red nucleus, a rubrospinal tract. Rubrospinal tract. So then we have the reticular system, the medullary reticular system. So this is the medullary reticular system. This is the tract, reticulospinal tract, the medullary reticulospinal tract. We have the vestibular system, the vestibulospinal tract. This is vestibulospinal tract. Again, vestibulospinal tract. We have some of the anterior and lateral vestibulospinal tract. So they again some amount of this thing discrimination is there. Here it is not shown. The vestibulospinal tract is only one is shown. Then tectospinal or colliculospinal. This is colliculospinal tract. Colliculospinal tract. You can see this both sides are tech. This is a tectospinal or colliculospinal. Then we have here the pontine reticulospinal tract. This is a medullary reticulospinal. This is medullary reticulospinal tract. This is pontine reticulospinal tract. It's here. You can see that. The pontine. So then I already explained about anterior corticospinal tract. Then medial longitudinal fasciculus, it is the central or the midline areas, they are communicating each other. So this is what the descending tracts. To summarize, you just try to remember what are the areas it should reach. Then it would reach to medulla and pons, and in the medulla and pons reach the medullary and pontine reticular system. That is ascending tracts. Fibers going from the spinal cord to the olivary nucleus. Olivary nucleus receives input from the cerebellum. And the spinocerebellar tract. Because these olivary, the fibers going to the olivary nucleus are a corrective fibers. So they correct the motion. The spinocerebellar tracts are the regarding the proprioceptive inputs. Then the collicular nucleus. These are the areas where it ascends and into the thalamus. All the sensory modalities, excepting the olfactory system, they reach the thalamic areas. So these are the ascending tracts. So that means you can talk about a spino-reticular, that's medullary, spino-pontine. So this is about ascending tracts. Now we have the descending tracts. They are coming from the again from the medulla, from the pons, from the olivary nucleus, from the vestibular colliculus, the tectum, the pontine reticular system, the red nucleus, rubrospinal, corticospinal tract. Now, what you see here, the descending tracts, there are no direct communication from the cerebellum or the basal ganglia. You can just see that cerebellum receives inputs, but cerebellum gives outputs to the olivary nucleus and to the vestibular nucleus or to the reticular system to bring about the posture regulating activity. So that means cerebellum per se do not talk to your spinal cord directly. This red nucleus and the corticospinal tract, they talk to the spinal motor neurons directly. Maybe here the extensor and then and flexor group flexor and extensor group of muscles they will be talking about. Now, again, I'm just depicting these are the descending tracts. The descending tracts include lateral corticospinal, rubrospinal, olivospinal, tectospinal, then ventral corticospinal, then vestibulospinal pathway. Just you try. This is taken from title. Then this side we have the ascending tracts. Ascending tracts, these are uncrossed fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. Then dorsal spinocerebellar, ventral spinocerebellar, lateral spinothalamic tract, the spinotectal tract, and ventral spinothalamic tract. Some of those tracts so there are not shown, which I have mentioned in the previous diagram. Now, I just close this today's lecture by giving you an assignment that you write the diagram of spinal cord showing ascending tracts and descending tracts. The next class I would take on the spinal cord injury and the spinal shock. Okay, these are the books, the Candles, the Guyton, and the Ganong's textbook of physiology. Okay, thank you.